I'm being followed by the CIA, or the NSA. It's nice to know that there's at least one government agency out there that listens to me. Well, we're off on another adventure today. Today we're heading off to a railroad museum. Now, there are lots of really big and wonderful railroad museums out there. Trust me, I love those places. But there are a lot of little small railroad museums out there. Some of them are nothing more than a locomotive or a caboose on display in a city park, or perhaps even a train station that's been converted into an antique store or a restaurant or whatever. But on some kind of level, they all sort of qualify as railroad museums. Today's museum is truly a museum. It's built and intended to be a museum and is run as a museum, but it is also incredibly small. So let's go check that out. The museum in question is the Tooele Valley Railroad Museum in the small town of Tooele, Utah. They have a steam locomotive and a couple of cabooses, a snowplow, just, the kind of smattering of equipment left over from the Tooele Valley Railroad, all stashed outside of the old Tooele City Depot. It's a legitimately fun place to come and visit. They don't get that many visitors. A lot of people don't even know that it exists. The Heber Valley Railroad was a mining operation. It brought ore down from the big mines up in the Oquirrh Mountains, more on that here in a minute, and they connected with the Union Pacific main line running between Salt Lake City and Las Vegas. They have a regular crowd of people who like to come here and sort of hang out, docents for lack of a better word, and they take care of the equipment, and they've built a 7.5-inch gauge live steam railroad around outside and a model railroad inside. They can be found most weekends playing with their model railroad, which exists inside an old passenger car. It's sort of a freelance railroad, but pretty much follows the Union Pacific. Most of the equipment here is Union Pacific. It's HO scale and uses DCC control system, which they can run from cell phones, which makes it really handy for the members. They can just fire the whole thing up from their smartphone and run the railroad. Tooele is a well-known Army depot. It's where they used to store nerve gas before they got rid of all that stuff. And so there's a lot of military stuff on display inside the passenger cars here. But the railroad was not really known for its involvement with the military. The railroad was a mining railroad. Now, if you were to ask the average person what was the biggest strike in the Old West, was it the Mother Lode or was it the Comstock in Nevada? I doubt very many people would say, well, I believe that was the Oquirrh Mountains. But it was. In fact, the Oquirrh Mountains was the biggest mining operation in the world. There was, something like a dozen different mining operations all inside this little tiny mountain range. The biggest of them, Bingham Canyon, dug this hole here. This used to be a mountain, and now it's a 3,000-foot deep hole. They're best known for pulling copper out of the mountain, but they've been pulling out gold and silver and every other kind of metal as well. It's just that the real wealth here has always been copper. Billions and billions of dollars worth of copper, but also billions of dollars worth of gold. The Bingham Canyon operation used to run by manpower, but these days it's sort of more of an automated thing. There's still people working there, but they've really reduced the workload by using machinery. This is the town of Bingham. Well, that's not there anymore either. This is part of the giant hole now. But back in the day, there was this great little town, Bingham, Utah. The reason Bingham doesn't exist is because of the success of these mines. They just gobbled the whole thing up. There were other towns around here as well. This is the mining town of Mercer, another huge town. And once again, today it's a great big mining area. None of this is left. This was the magnificent Golden Gate Mill at the top end of Mercer. But Mercer was quite a town. Bingham Canyon was on the east side of the Oquirrh. Mercer was on the west side of the Oquirrh. There was another little town here, too, called Ophir. Ophir's kind of still there, but not really all that much. This mountain range is only maybe 20 miles long and 8 miles thick, and yet it had all this crazy, wonderful mining going on in it, and it still does, still in full operation to this day. Tooele was also on the west side of the mountain range. The Tooele Valley Railroad hauled the ore under the mountain range from the Carr Fork mine to the big mill and smelter at International, Utah. And the finished metals were delivered to the Union Pacific main line just a few miles from there. This was a thriving operation, and it closed down not because the mines played out, but just because technology made it possible to do this easier and cheaper with fewer men and no steam locomotives. The weird thing is that there's just almost nothing of this left because the mines just gobbled everything up, except the Tooele Depot here and this smattering of equipment, which is now the Tooele Valley Museum. And so while there really isn't that much here, it's well worth checking out, in part just because of the amazing history and what this equipment represents. And we need to keep in mind at all times that the regulars here are spending some good quality time screwing around with the 7.5-inch gauge railroad and the HO scale railroad in the passenger car, and preserving a bit of very, very interesting history in the process. I couldn't resist the temptation to drive up to the site of the old International mill and smelter, and, well, there's just nothing left here. If it weren't for the slag heaps, you wouldn't even know that there was ever anything here. Just that and a smattering of old grade that goes up into the mountains. Well, there you go, the Tooele Valley Railroad Museum, a small but fun little place with a kind of regular crowd of people that hang out there and play with the model trains and so on and so forth. It's a good deal of fun. If you haven't been over to the channel, then pop over to the channel and subscribe, of course, while you're there. And you can also go to the Facebook page and like and follow and those Facebooky kinds of things. And do go to the website, toymantelevision.com. It's kind of one-stop shopping for everything Toyman there. It's a good deal of fun if you check that out. I'm not sure how you found this particular movie on the internet. I sure as heck hope you didn't find it boring. And I'll see you here again in 1 week with another classic example of screwing around. I'll see you then. Bye.